Hello, hello. You are listening to the Aligned Birth Podcast. I'm Dr. Shannon. I'm one of the hosts of the show, and today is an interview day. It's one of my favorite days. And so I am joined today with Paige Beckett, and she is a certified professional midwife. So we're talking all things midwifery today. I've been dying to have another midwife on the show. We've had Rachel Hart with Birthing Way, whom I know you love and adore. And so I'm so excited to have you on today. She's been attending homebirths in and around the Atlanta area for quite a while. She's been part of the Atlanta birth community for the last 12 years. She's super passionate about empowering birthing families and birth workers to advocate for themselves and their birthing options. So I want to talk about how Paige got to where she is today. I love going with birth workers and talking about their journey into how they got into the birth worker field, because that gives just insight into their knowledge base and what they know and what they've experienced, and not only personally, but professionally. So we're going to see how she got into the midwifery world, her education and journey to now. She's got a lot of education, so I can't wait to chat about that. What she's learned over the years, words of wisdom for those looking for home birth, and what does the midwifery model of care look like? Why is it needed and necessary in the birthing community? And I'm excited to chat about all things home birth midwifery today. Welcome to the Aligned Birth Podcast. I'm Dr. Shannon, a prenatal chiropractor.
And I'm Rachel, a birth doula and childbirth educator. Together, we're here to bring you conversations about pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. From cesarean to VBAC, hospital to home births, we've experienced it all. We are high school friends who reconnected through our shared passion for health and birth. As moms to two young boys, we've both changed careers after our own transformative childbirth experiences.
Join us as we discuss the importance of a healthy body and mind throughout pregnancy, birth, and into motherhood. Our goal is to provide fun, interesting, and helpful conversations and interviews that inspire learning. When your body, mind, and intuition are aligned, you can conquer anything.
Sit back and relax, or grab a notebook and take some notes, or maybe listen as you enjoy a walk. However you choose to listen, we hope you enjoy this episode of the Aligned Birth Podcast. Before we get into the episode today, if you enjoy the content of this podcast, we would greatly appreciate your support in one of three ways. First, leave us a review or give us a 5-star rating. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and make a bigger impact. Second, you can sign up for our newsletter. By doing so, you'll be the first to receive new episodes and exclusive bonus resources straight to your inbox each week. Lastly, you can become a direct listener supporter. Running this podcast requires significant time, effort, and resources. Your contribution, no matter the amount, helps us continue providing valuable content to a wider audience. Simply use the links in the show notes to make your donation, sign up for our newsletter, or leave us a review. Every contribution matters and is sincerely appreciated. If the Aligned Birth Podcast is a part of your weekly routine and you love what we are doing, please consider supporting us through one of these three options. Your support will create a ripple effect, allowing us to reach more listeners and make a lasting difference.
So welcome to the show, Paige.
Thanks for having me.
Yay. I know Paige in real life, so that's fun, because a lot of times when I'm doing these interviews, I'll be like, I know you from social media and I don't know you in real life, but I feel like I would like you. So I actually know Paige in real life and have met her. And we met, you've been in the birthing community a lot longer than I have. But we met doing Georgia Birth Network. Was that when we met? Yeah. And so we used to be involved with Georgia Birth Network, and just really trying to empower the birthing community in the Atlanta area. So, I want to maybe start with how you got involved in midwifery.
Yeah.
So take it way back.
So I've been a mom for 24 years almost. And so birth has kind of always, been happening around me or in me.
Exactly.
So I didn't really even have like the internet or email until my third baby, and she's going to be 16 this year.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't know that home birth existed. I didn't know about doulas till like the end of my final pregnancy. And I just had fairly straightforward births, the second and third birth. Had a 42 and 2 week induction with my first. And so with these fast births, in hindsight, I'm like, why did nobody tell me to have a home birth? I like had these babies like walking into the hospital pushing. They were quick. Why I could have had
Could have
babies at
just stayed at
home.
home. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some great midwives still, back then, who are still practicing today. Like totally could have had babies with them. So after my third baby, it just kind of stuck with me that like, wow, that was some unnecessary experiences. I started being more involved in moms groups and was hearing about doulas and natural births and all of this stuff. And I was like, that's so interesting. Those people are so nice to do doula work and stuff. Like, but surely they can't make money doing that. Like, so eventually, like, I discovered more and realized, oh, this is actually a profession. Um, and so when my daughter got a little bit older, I was like, you know what? I think I want to give this doula thing a try. So I became a doula. And then, of course, as most birth workers find out, you just become all encompassed down this birth rabbit hole because it's amazing and it is empowering, and to see how bodies work. So I became a lamaze educator. I became a baby steps childbirth educator. Helped run that company for a little bit. I think they're still around. So
I
that was
think
just a
so. I
great
know. Yeah.
great program that I really enjoyed being a part of. And I learned so much. So during the time of doing doula work, I got hired to do a home birth, and they had midwives. And so I was just coming in as labor support. And I was blown away by the process. I was just like, I heard this was happening. You read the books and you hear about it, but I didn't really know anybody that had had a home birth. Until I started getting immersed in the doula community. So I went to actually 2 home births, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I was just like, this was amazing. Like seeing that the midwives were taking care of the mom and baby. They were doing heart tones, blood pressure, like everything seemed like pretty above board, like, pretty professional. And I'm like, this is like a thing.
And then
I have
comparing it to what you had at the hospital, you're kind of like, well, yeah, I could have done this and it's more peaceful,
Well,
like it's,
and I started while I was at the hospital doula births that I was hired for, really just like comparing. And I'm
mhm.
like, that actually happened at that home birth, and they did this instead of everybody freaking out. Or like just starting to see all the things and how they played out.
And
And
how it's
I just really,
managed in both worlds.
yes, and how it was managed, and just looking into it more and talking to some other doulas that I met that had home births, I just felt very compelled to give this home birth midwife thing a chance. And so I talked to a midwife friend that I knew from Georgia Birth Network, and I'm like, I would just like to be your apprentice. I want to try to be a home birth midwife. And so I spent probably the hardest and yet best 4 years of my life with a 2 midwifery practice, going to all their births and all their prenatals and postpartums. And I just loved it so
That
much.
sounds so intense though, like that's
It
a
was,
good chunk of time. Yeah.
it was so
And babies are
intense.
unpredictable. Birth is unpredictable. So,
I would say an average of like 8 births a month was happening. The midwives would kind of alternate, and
mhm.
when sometimes there was another student that would come in and out. It's hard to be a midwifery student, so a lot of midwifery students, unfortunately, don't make it.
Mhm.
Their families just can't be without them that long. I'm also super excited because I've seen sustainability in student midwifery and midwifery really start to increase. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something I'm super passionate about. Um, Toward the end of my apprenticeship, I started to really be like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to have a family? How am I going to have a work-life balance? Uh, I met a great midwife, Madeline Murray Lutz. She owns
Mm-hmm.
Believe in Midwifery. Love her so much. Her talk that I went to and now her program just really changed my midwifery outlook. And like at a crucial time where, I'm about to graduate and starting to feel defeated because I was so exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I learned I'm not going to do this many births by myself. So it's going to be great. I ended up opening a 3 midwife practice. Madeline joined for a time. It was a great experience. We did kind of dissolve at some point just because some people were having lots of babies. There was a distance, a move, all that kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
we still talk and, pick each other's brains. So
Yeah, no,
now,
I love Madeline. Yeah, she's a great wealth of knowledge. Yeah.
yeah,
And she's passionate
yeah.
about the sustainability in midwifery. And so
Yes.
that's
I
what,
mean, and yeah, and I will never do it any differently. I am in a solo practice right now, but I'm still very intentional about the sustainability, about my self-care, taking care of myself, things like that. So,
what are some of the things? Because so you mentioned that you've seen how the sustainability in midwifery has increased. What do you think has been one of the reasons for that? Or what are some of the things that have caused that, for midwives to stay midwives for the length of time that they do?
mhm. I feel like some of it is like newer generations of midwives learning from previous midwives, like what did and didn't work for them. Maybe the other midwives sharing like what they had done differently, and just
Mm-hmm.
technology, social media, all the things that we can take advantage of that just make running business in general easier, setting boundaries
Mm-hmm.
and letting our clients know that we want this working relationship with them, but we can't sacrifice like our lives and ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I got my CPM in 2017 through a process called the PEP, portfolio evaluation process. So it means I did all my clinicals with the midwifery practice, did my book work separate, sat for the national exam after I got all my numbers and clinical skills sign offs and things like that. Then, at a few years later, probably about 2 or 3 years later, I enrolled in Midwives College of Utah. And so my intention with that was to get my bachelor's in midwifery. And that was a completely different experience because my clinical skills were like learned. Like I didn't need to learn to do all of that again. But what I was able to do was just dive into research and how to see how things how were they evidence based. Was I learning things like, when people say, oh, ACOG says, well, there's a thing called the hierarchy um, of like information. ACOG
Yes.
is like way down there on the bottom of the pyramid as
Mm-hmm.
not you always using like the highest level of research.
Mm-hmm.
It
There
can
is a
be more of a
pyramid. Yeah.
premium piece. Yes. And so
Mm-hmm.
learning that kind of stuff has really benefit my practice. I feel like as I'm just like finding out more evidence based, using more education, but also pulling in that long term wisdom I have learned from the older generation of midwives. And I'm not saying
That can't be replaced, like
it cannot be replaced
that
for sure.
clinical expertise mixed with, yes, some of the research and mixed with what, yeah, like that is what creates
Yeah.
all of that knowledge. Yeah, it definitely can't be replaced. Yeah.
No, and I never want to come across as you need all this education formally to be, serving families at home. But I do think you need to have some sort of apprenticeship, even different states have different ways that they do things. So Georgia is not the best state to practice midwifery in. We have nurse midwives practicing home birth. We have certified professional midwives practicing home birth. We have traditional midwives practicing home birth. We have certified community midwives practicing home birth. All of them, for the most part, I feel like have really great hearts, and they want to be educated. They want to make sure they're doing, the best care they can for these families, all while the state of Georgia is making it really hard on us to practice. Another thing that I'm passionate about has been working on licensure. Of course, my views on it have changed a bit after spending a good 4 years advocating for the licensure of home birth midwives. Unfortunately, the state of Georgia is just not open to helping home birth midwives have an easier time of practicing. They're not getting the big picture. They're just looking at home birth is dangerous and we don't want families to do it. Whereas we have presented evidence to say contrary, it's not being well received. We now have a study that came out in 2022. The Atlanta Journal actually posted it. It included all of the United States states, but Georgia specifically had an increase in home birth of 29%. That's huge when you have about 1% of your population having home birth. To have that growth happen, what is just amazing to see. So now we don't actually have enough home birth midwives for the amount of people that want home births every month. Now it's a scramble. You get a positive pregnancy test. You better call your midwife. You better do your interviews and pick somebody.
Yeah.
Because so many more people want to have home births and we can only take so many clients a month.
No, I definitely see that now. Cause I try to tell my moms, I'm like, yeah, you might, if you know that this is what you want to do, you've got to establish that relationship. Sometimes it's like those daycare centers that like get so full and you've got to like go ahead and put your name in before you even have a baby.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of the same thing with the home birth midwives. Well, and we were chatting a little bit before starting this recording and you'd mentioned that study. And I think I noticed in the office that I had a lot more moms more open and receptive to the possibility of a home birth during COVID when things were so unsettled in the hospital, as far as like some moms were like, well, I don't want to wear a mask while I'm trying to breathe this, baby down, or I want to have my support people. And so, sometimes there's little silver linings of things, that happen. So then maybe I think that might have been a good push for a lot of families to consider, okay, well, why not at home? Because, I think it's fear-mongering aspect of like, all of these things can go wrong in birth. And yes, sometimes in rare instances they do, but for a normal physiological birth, can be very, very safe to have at home, a lot more relaxing. And now you got to experience firsthand those differences of like what you went through and then seeing with your doula work when you were doing that with the moms. So I think that study is really cool though. And I think, it does go to show that we should give our Georgia home birth midwives a chance.
Yeah. At least not try to make it more difficult, and it's not just difficult for us as the provider. There's things that could happen that make it easier for the families. Right now, insurance reimbursement is really hard. The nurse midwives, I think, have a little bit more luck. If you have like a healthcare share program insurance instead of like the typical big insurance companies, you're going to have a little bit of easier time. But because of the state of midwifery in Georgia, a lot of insurance companies push back on it. So therefore, you're not having necessarily all the families that want to have a home birth have home births, because if their insurance is going to completely pay for the $30,000 to $80,000 bill for a standard vaginal birth with an epidural versus, the anywhere probably from $4,000 to $6,000 fee it is for a home birth in
For a home
Georgia.
birth. Yep.
It's a no-brainer at
It's
that
that it
point.
comes down to finances with that though,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
where that licensure aspect comes in. And then again, too, a lot of times, I deal with this in the chiropractic world and people trying to get reimbursed with care and insurance. It's like they're looking at a low totem pole on that pyramid of evidence. And
Mhm.
so, you know,
Yeah, and licensure would also open the door to Medicaid reimbursement for home birth midwifery care.
mhm.
You know, we have a terrible maternal mortality rate in Georgia, and Black and brown birthing people are having bad outcomes 4 times. I think it's about 4 times
Mhm.
more than white birthing people. And one of the things to fix that is providers that look like you, people that understand,
Mhm.
and don't have bias, and more intentional care, more in-depth care. And home birth
Mhm.
midwives provide that. They're
Provide
seeing
that.
you, yeah, they're seeing you for 45 minutes to an hour at a time. You have better access to them. If you have a complication or something feels off, you have typically that midwife's cell phone. You can call her, you can text her. Whereas if you're having a really bad headache and seeing spots and dizzy, which is a sign of, preeclampsia, before or after you're having trouble after the birth or whatever, you get an answering service when you call when you call a hospital practice. You may or may not get a call back. That disconnect keeps birthing people sometimes from like reaching out. They're like, "Oh, I'll just call tomorrow," or, "Oh, I'm going in a couple days, I'll mention it." And big problems can arise from that. So home
Mhm.
birth midwives are actually quicker at screening issues that are going on with their clients and moving them to the next level of care if need be. Or just reassuring them everything is normal and here's some comfort measures or things you can try to feel better.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of leads me into that's what I want to know what that midwifery model of care looks like. And so you mentioned, kind of briefly there how that differs from the I guess that medical management.
Mhm.
And again too, not to bash the medical management of pregnancy and OBs and that type of thing.
Definitely not.
But
Definitely not.
they just see a higher number of people, um, and that goes back to the sustainability of midwifery, because if you are giving that intensive care, it is not possible to see the number and the volume of people that a bigger practice sees. So there are going to be, limitations to matter to that aspect of things. But
Mhm.
what else in that midwifery model of care? You mentioned just that easier access to the midwives. They've got, I guess, a lower patient client load, and they see you for longer. Do you typically see clients more often, or what are some other things in that midwifery model of care that make it different than that medical management?
Sure. So, appointment wise, we see everybody about the same prenatally. If somebody needs to be seen more frequently, of course, we're going to, do what we need to do. It's just that you have the longer appointments. You're getting to know each other. I think there's greater client satisfaction when they know their midwife and they've built that relationship and they feel like they can ask the question and they feel like the midwife knows how they want their birth to go, and they're there to try to support that as best that they can. I feel like postpartum is where things really stand out differently between the medical model of care. So you have your baby, pardon me, in the hospital and you go home with about 24 hours after. And the next time you see your provider is maybe 6 weeks. A lot of women or birthing people aren't even going in 6 weeks. So the home birth midwives were coming back throughout that period to check. So it varies. Some people do, most everybody does a 24 to 48-hour time period. We're checking in by phone after that. Definitely, a 1 week appointment, checking on mom and babies both of those times, just making sure they're still remaining low risk, and not just from a physical standpoint. How is that mom dealing emotionally? How is the family unit doing? Is there support there? Does it seem like they need some help in figuring out meals or managing the other kids? Like, we try to talk prenatally about what the plan is going to be postpartum for sure, but is that being implemented and what can we
Mm-hmm.
do? Or screening, is there any postpartum depression signs popping up? Are there any breastfeeding issues going on that we can help with or refer out to somebody that has more experience? So really just the emotional and physical aspects are really being looked into prenatally or postpartum wise.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's huge because when you've got that level of connection, that's where you can really see someone feeling empowered with their birth,
Mm-hmm.
and feeling seen and heard. And, you're going over those birth plans and you're listening to those birth plans or birth preferences,
Mm-hmm.
that people have. I, I think that's just fun to kind of hear what those differences are. Because I'm hoping that kind of speaks to someone as far as like, well, how do you want to feel about that birth? And if you're at a certain practice, do you feel that you're going to have that connection and
Mm-hmm.
that support and that intensive look and focus on you while, you're getting ready to
Yeah.
go through one of the biggest processes
Yes.
of your life. Now, what what kind of words of wisdom would you give for those who are seeking out or potentially considering home births? A lot of moms that I've interviewed on the show who have had a home birth, I like to ask, a lot of times it's whoever's giving birth is thinking about the home birth, but then you've also got this partner, the spouse, whoever else is around, that if they have reservations, that can also sway, whoever's giving
Mm-hmm.
birth. So I kind of want to know, like, what kind of words of wisdom have you had for whoever is giving birth, but then also like that partner and spouse and things that you've seen that have worked for those.
Yeah. So I think for the person giving birth, be patient with your partner and try to figure out how you can be supportive to them. And that may be Georgia Birth Network did a panel like on dads and home birth. I wonder if it was recorded and anywhere findable. But if you can find videos, that would be awesome. But ask the midwife that you're talking to, considering using, if they have any previous clients where they're willing to talk to the partner,
Mm-hmm.
where the partner's willing to talk to them and kind of answer their questions. Bring your partner to the consult, as many prenatals as they can attend. They're also getting to know your midwife and team. And so that is going to help them feel more comfortable as well. Uh, Sometimes partners just need like concise information studies, like, given to them. Handing them the birthing partner book is probably not going to go well because, everybody's super busy and time limits are short. So, I don't know, maybe you guys can do a podcast and have a couple partners on here that had home births
I know we want to do a
and
doulas and
they can
dads at
update.
least.
Yeah.
Yes. I
So,
know. Well, we just had, I just had Jessica Patterson on. So she had a cesarean her first birth, and then she had 3 home births after that, and her last one was an unassisted one. Not
okay.
but not planned unassisted, but just kind of it just happened,
Yeah.
And I remember asking her what what her husband's thoughts were, because we were coming from cesarean to home birth, and
Mhm.
she was like, he read the books, he got involved, and he also was like asking, his suggestion was to talk to other spouses that are in the same predicament as you, are in that same aspect, and saying like, okay, what did you see, what helped you, and just, I guess it's really that being as involved as possible,
Yes. At
it
one
sounds like.
point, National Association of Certified Professional Midwives Georgia chapter did some recordings interviewing home birth families. And I'll try to get you the links to that. Maybe you can do it for show
That
notes
would be
because it has
fun. Yeah.
dads and partners on there talking about it too. I just remembered, like, we did record that. I think it went down like right about the time maybe COVID was gonna start hitting. And so like the promotion and all of that kind of like fell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not really
Kind of
impacted legislation
pushed
work.
behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I would love to put that. And then I want to put the research study that you mentioned too in the show notes. So you'll have to send that
Yeah.
to me as well. Um, let's see. So so tell me a little bit about what you have started doing now and what your midwifery practice is called and what that looks like now.
So I took a bit of a hiatus. I am now a single mom of teenagers. And so I have come back into the midwifery world. Was doing some assisting for some great midwives just to kind of keep my skills fresh and, familiar with all, the birthing energy. And so now I have started my own practice called New Horizons Birth Services. Serve the Marietta and surrounding areas about an hour. I am taking about 2 to 3 clients a month, so really intimate practice. I feel like that gives me the sustainability that I'm looking for. I'm going to miss some sleep, of course, but it's not going to be, so much that I can't recover for it, or I can't be there for my kids, or I can't manage all the prenatals and do my single mom thing. So, yeah, I am also keeping that small because I am working on going back to school. I'm a big nerd,
Of
more
course you are.
school. And
Okay, what are
uh,
you doing this time?
so I am going to attempt to get my master's in maternal child health. And so I could get a master's in midwifery, but I feel really now called. I big believer in trusting your gut and what is being laid in front of you to just work in a bigger realm of research and education, and that will open doors for me to have the master's in maternal child health. So
Okay,
it
so
got delayed a little bit. I was supposed to start last month, but a divorce and becoming single, and it was a very, very,
just some
yeah,
minor things.
that's just some, big life changes. It was a 40-hour-a-week program.
Yeah,
And
that's a lot.
if you know the Enneagram, I'm a 6. And so I was like, I can do this. It's fine. And then as it was getting closer, I was really just like reflecting before, like, signing on the dotted line after getting accepted. And I was like, I can't serve my clients well
Mm-hmm.
if I do this. I can't show up for my kids how I want to. I can't show up for myself how I want to.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I'm exploring some different programs that would
Mm-hmm.
maybe give me less than 40 hours, but it's definitely like a goal that I will be working on shortly.
That's so exciting. I expect nothing less. I know you love, yeah, you love the school, the continued learning, but I think that's important though too, to stay on top of those things, and then that's what you bring, what you bring to the table, but then also looking at that impact that it can make for the research world and what we
Mhm.
need for, that pyramid, that hierarchy of research and understanding to help other families that want to do, a home birth and that
Yeah,
sort of
and it
thing.
will also hopefully get a foot in the door for like policy work. And so that
Mm-hmm.
Georgia needs a lot of policy reform.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things are outdated. Unfortunately, it takes about 10 years for evidence research to make its way into daily practice for healthcare
Mm-hmm.
providers. So I'm hoping to kind of
Yeah.
change that a little.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We need it. We need it. Um, what I kind of like those, like, what I really do and what people think I do and what my mom thinks I do, like those type of little memes. What would you say, or what you wish people knew more about, I guess, midwifery care in general? Because you can have midwives in an OB practice. So you can have
Mhm.
midwives there, but then that home birth, midwife is a little bit different. We're outside of the hospital there. So what would you say as far as like what you think people think you do, but what you wish people what it really was and what it really is?
Yeah, so I think people think that I am holding babies all the time, Like, every day I just go to somebody's house and they have this nice birth and I hold their baby and it's great. And that happens 2 to 3 days a month because I take very few clients. Mostly I'm doing paperwork and entering labs and looking. It's like paperwork and returning emails and some more paperwork. But also screening. Home birth midwives spend a lot of time making sure they're taking on low risk clients and also helping those clients stay low risk, whether that's through how they're eating, how they're moving their bodies, how they're thinking, looking at labs and seeing how we can improve on what the numbers are telling us. And that reminds me, one of your things you said you wanted me to share was my favorite resource. So
Yeah.
I discovered this book. Did I not take a picture? It is Lily Nichols' nutrition book. Do you know it?
Yeah. Real Nutrition for Pregnancy.
Yes.
It's
I
amazing.
I discovered that book when I was working on my bachelor's. I did a really intense class on nutrition, and that book was really awesome resource as one of the resources. So I wanted to share that because it's a little
Yeah.
different than like the typical, like, guides to childbirth and all the other things,
Yeah. Or yeah, exactly.
you
Didn't
know.
she I think she made that one based just around like gestational diabetes, right? And kind of like
Oh, no,
using
this
diet
book,
with that. Is that what that was?
no,
I can't
this
remember.
book, she might have one specifically for that.
Okay.
But this one encompassed all the different nutrition, all the different vitamins. Do you need to have more
Mm-hmm.
vitamin B? Here's this, and here's why this food is better, and here's why, options that if you're not eating meat, here's things that you can try, um,
Mm-hmm.
and what that vitamin provides for you and your growing baby. And I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that was pretty amazing to realize
Mm-hmm.
I'm eating these carrots because it's like affecting this in me and my baby.
And
For
that's a
me, it makes
different
it a little bit more,
mentality. Mm-hmm.
it changes your mentality. I'm not just eating this because my midwife said to eat this. I'm eating this
Right.
because
I'm understanding the physiological aspect that this is having on the body. No, I think that's big. And I love that it's a lot of like using that food as medicine type of thing. I like that as far as
and
okay,
that's
well,
a
what can
big
we
thing about,
change in the
a big
diet?
model of midwifery care is starting with little intervention as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
food, sometimes essential oils, homeopathy, all those things have a place, especially early on if something's going on. So yeah, trying those first is a big part of midwifery.
Mm-hmm. So it's the paperwork. That's what people don't
And
realize.
the paperwork, they
All the
don't
paperwork.
realize like the paperwork. Online charting, I think those systems that have been created help some, but
There's a lot of behind the scenes.
yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
want to cross, dot our I's and cross our T's. We want to make sure that we have everything looking
Mm-hmm.
as official as possible so that when we do interact with other healthcare providers or the medical community, as far as like in case of transfer or something we're suspecting is wrong, we come across as professional as well as
Mm-hmm.
being a more natural minded practice, but we also are doing the behind the scenes work to show that we're taking care of these families. We're not just showing up with our essential oils and our birth bag of, a bulb syringe and, you know, hoping
Calling
for
it a
the
day. Yeah.
best. It is like this whole process, and we're bringing all these things, and we're, listening to the baby's heartbeat and keeping the birthing person's blood pressure in check, all these things that we're
Mm-hmm.
doing. So,
Well,
yeah.
and I'm glad you mentioned all of those little things. And I'm glad you mentioned that it was the behind the scenes paperwork because um, using a home birth midwife, there is a standard of care that you are expected and required to provide for these
Mhm.
families. And so, yes, you are meeting that. In fact, I've even used a home birth midwife for my annual exams. She came to the house and did like pap
Nice.
smear and all that stuff. And I was like, this is way better. So,
Mhm.
I mean, you guys can, and not every not every midwife does that because sustainability, that also
Yeah.
takes time and energy. But no, I think having people understand that there are things that are required you and expected of you, and that home birth midwives do provide that as well. So
Mhm.
now you started off as a doula and then switched into this midwifery world. So I would like for you to speak, because I still deal with moms that maybe don't know all the differences or ins and outs between a doula and a midwife. So do you want to speak on some of the differences there?
Yeah.
I feel like I know, we know this so well, but still don't think everybody does. So
For sure. I heard somebody say that an OB said, you had your baby home at home with what? Like a doula? And like, so the healthcare professional, the medical world, they do not get it. And it's a hard thing. Like, we can't educate everybody. But for everybody listening to this podcast, so doulas provide hands-on comfort measure support and can provide some level of like educational information. So like maybe referring you to the evidence-based birth handouts about, what vitamin K is, or GBS, group B strep, all those things. So they can give you information that should be already proof, like, I don't know the word, sorry. And then they're also helping you maybe make a birth plan, teach you ways to work through the intensity of labor. They're there to encourage you to kind of do some hands-on counter pressure, hip squeeze, massage if that's their thing, that kind of stuff. They should not be doing any kind of clinical procedures. They shouldn't be typically they should not be taking blood pressure. They shouldn't be listening to heart tones, telling you exactly how you should make your choices in your birth. As a health care provider, I don't want them necessarily speaking for my clients, because I want my clients to tell me what they think, but they can also remind them of their birth plan, and things like that. So, and also, that said, those lines I hear often get kind of blurred. Now, there are whole communities that can benefit from blood pressure readings by anybody, because blood pressure issues is an indicator of a lot of health issues. In rural communities, we are losing doctors left and right. We have 92 counties, last time I checked, without a labor and delivery. That means they don't have a doctor to deliver their baby. So, those are all things that I think different community organizations have in the works. I support that because it's being worked on for the greater good. But for a doula just to individually be like, I'm going to do all of this and charge a little bit more, it's not my favorite.
That's where it's blurred the line.
If you're working within a bigger system to help a whole people group have better health, needs to happen. Doulas should not be delivering babies. I don't want to go too much into the whole free birth community.
We don't have to.
Well, I want to support every person. As a healthcare provider, I've seen so many things from people that might be doulas or might be ambiguous about their level of care and training, have things that don't go well, that I guess I would encourage parents, do your interviews, ask the questions, ask for references, ask how they learned these skills.
That's what I was just about to say. When you were going down that route, I was like, this is what we do.
Yes.
We ask those
you
questions.
don't need to have letters by your name. You don't need to have, an education. You need to be able to say how and why and when you learned all the skills needed to protect the birthing space and the people, the birthing person and the baby. So, You need to ask, do you know how to resuscitate a baby that needs a little help? Do you know how to work through some basic birth emergencies or struggles? Do you know how to help the birthing person if they're bleeding too much? What do you do in case things are not looking as they should? How often do you listen to the baby in labor? What is, what are your reasons for transport? All these things are good questions just to verify that training is happening and they haven't gone to, 20 home births as a doula and thought it looked easy, so they decided to do it themselves. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, you're going to run into people that are doing that. You're going to run into people that are coming from a more traditional midwifery training, and they're completely fine and completely safe to have a baby with. It's just that you have to ask the questions to figure out the difference.
No, definitely. And it's that interview process that you have with kind of everybody on your birth support team.
Yeah.
So what so as we talk of what a doula is, how does that differ from the home birth midwife specifically? Because
So
that's one
homebirth
delivering the baby.
midwives, as homebirth midwives, a lot of us have done doula work, and then did the apprenticeship or some kind of training to become clinically prepared to do the skills needed for mom and baby. Um, the difference is the longer I practice, the more I'm starting to feel that we can't be expected as home birth midwives to do the long-term, intense, hands-on comfort measures. Just because we can, just because we have now come to care for you and your family, whether on a friend's level or just a really compassionate healthcare provider, we can help some, but you don't want us exhausted. You don't want us to have been doing comfort measures for hours and hours, and now it's time to deliver your baby and it's 3 a.m. and we're, you want
Now
us
I'm
to kind of
tired.
be we're going to be tired because we may have been there, but there's a difference in like physically hands-on pressing on somebody's back or doing hip squeeze. Like these muscles, when you're a doula, are a lot stronger than like when you're a midwife. And so if you're feeling you need that like intense hands-on support, for sure hire a doula. Just because your partner also will physically and mentally feel relieved if you do.
And that's how I have typically described it too, as far as I was like, the midwife is not there for the entirety of your labor, because you have early labor and you might be talking to the midwife, but the midwife doesn't necessarily need to be there. It could be for a longer length of time. So you're in communication with, the midwife. If you have a doula, the doula can be there to help with some of those comfort measures.
Yeah.
They're there a little bit longer, but then again, too, the doula is not the one delivering the baby as well too. So I think it's a beautiful like support team to have, and I think it is important for partner or spouse to have the doula around as well too. I was telling a mom recently about that because I was like, it's going to make him feel better because it's not going to all be on his shoulders, and doulas are trained, as far as going through some sort of
we can work really well
measures
together for sure.
Yeah. Let's see, anything else that you kind of want to chat about with midwifery and home birth midwifery model of care, or anything that we didn't really touch on today?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I'm just always trying to encourage midwives, student midwives, to figure out what sustainability looks like for them. You matter. It's not a family way up here and like the midwife is way down here. Like it's a partnership. And so everybody needs to feel respected. Everybody needs, to feel like they're understood. And that's how it's going to work best for sure.
And what looks sustainable for one midwife is going to look different for
For sure.
another.
For
So,
sure.
it's that that work-life flow. I like to say flow instead of balance because there's really no balance to it. You know, it's just kind of like it's up and down. There's a flow to it. I think that's important as well too. So just knowing like, okay, if that works for me to only take 2 to 3 births a month because this is where I'm at in my world, well then that's what works for you, and you're going to be able to provide the best care for those families. So,
you know, and midwives that are taking more than that, like more power to them. They probably have a better system in place than I've been able to create. We all, you know, every season of midwifery life looks different. So yeah. And I think that's the other thing, you know, most of the time our clients don't know what's going on, you know, in depth in our personal lives. And so that's also kind of a balance midwives have to figure out is like, you know, when I was a student, I had like a lot of kid drama going on that, you know, I might have been at the hospital with a kid and then left the hospital to come do a birth. But the families didn't know that. So always just give your midwife a little bit of grace. She might have something going on. Her coffee might not have been strong enough, or, you know,
life is happening behind the scenes. Well, that was one of my goals today, was to really kind of shed light on what that home birth midwifery model of care can look like. And so I think this is really, really informative. I hope people listen to it and learn something from it, or at least can go, oh, maybe I could consider that, you know, and just kind of dive down that rabbit hole of home birth. Because it is a fun little rabbit hole.
Being a midwife or having a home birth, you know.
Yes, all the things. Always so fun to talk with you. I'm so excited to have you back in the area practicing again as well.
I am
too. So
it's been great.
We're going to have to meet again in real life.
Yes. Yes, I want to go to that coffee place in Ackworth.
Yes. They just celebrated a birthday. There's this cute little place downtown Ackworth called the Fountain. And so, we want to.
I've been there for dinner, but I haven't been there for coffee, and it looks so cute.
Oh, it's so cute. Yeah. So we're definitely going to have to do that. But again, thank you so much, Paige, for being on the show. I'm so very grateful for you and what you provide the birthing community, especially in Georgia and at large. So you are needed, and I am so excited to have you in the birthing community, my friend.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Aligned Birth Podcast. We hope you found our discussions informative, inspiring, and enjoyable. Remember, when your body, mind, and intuition are aligned, you have the power to overcome any challenge that comes your way. We appreciate your support and leaving a review or rating, signing up for our newsletter, or becoming a direct listener supporter. Your contribution helps us continue delivering valuable content and reaching more listeners like yourself. Stay connected with us through our newsletter to receive the latest episodes and bonuses straight to your inbox each week. You can also connect with us on Instagram at aligned_birth. All links can be found in the show notes. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of the birthing individuals and new moms. Thank you for being a part of our community. We look forward to sharing more empowering conversations on the Aligned Birth Podcast. Until next time.